The most dangerous mistake an officer can make isn't stopping the wrong car. It's believing they've already figured out the person behind the wheel. The afternoon traffic outside downtown Arlington flowed with the steady rhythm of another ordinary weekday. Office workers hurried through intersections. Delivery trucks squeezed between lanes. Commuters counted the minutes until they could finally head home. Nothing about the black sedan traveling quietly along Jefferson Parkway attracted attention. At least, it shouldn't have. Nathan Brooks rested one hand on the steering wheel while the other tapped lightly against the center console in time with the soft jazz playing through the speakers. Dressed in dark jeans, a charcoal jacket, and a simple navy polo, he looked like any other professional finishing a long day. His badge wasn't visible. His credentials remained secured inside a leather holder tucked beneath the driver's seat. He preferred it that way whenever he was off duty. After nearly 15 years in federal law enforcement, Nathan understood something many people never did. The badge wasn't supposed to introduce the man. The man was supposed to honor the badge. A sudden burst of flashing red and blue lights appeared in his rearview mirror. Nathan glanced at his speedometer. 5 miles below the posted limit. He checked his mirrors again before calmly signaling and pulling onto the shoulder. The entire maneuver took less than 20 seconds. He rolled down the driver's window before either officer reached the vehicle. 2 white patrol officers stepped out of the cruiser. The older one approached with slow confidence. His nameplate read Officer Brad Miller. The younger officer remained near the rear quarter panel. Officer Dylan Cole. Both watched Nathan carefully. Officer Miller stopped beside the open window. License and registration. Nathan nodded politely. Certainly, officer. He reached slowly toward the glove compartment. My registration is inside. Keep your hands where I can see them. Nathan immediately froze. Understood. I'll wait for your instructions. Miller studied him for several seconds before nodding. Go ahead. Nathan retrieved the documents exactly as instructed and handed them over without argument. Miller looked them over. Nathan Brooks. Yes, sir. You live across town. I do. What brings you through this neighborhood? Nathan answered calmly. I'm driving home. Miller looked up. That's not what I asked. Nathan met his eyes without changing his expression. I had business nearby earlier today. What kind of business? Professional. Miller's tone hardened. What profession? Nathan paused for only a moment. I work in federal law enforcement. The younger officer let out a quiet laugh behind the patrol car. Miller folded his arms. Federal law enforcement. Yes. What agency? Nathan remained respectful. I'm sorry, officer. I can't discuss operational assignments while off duty. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the entire roadside. Miller's expression changed. What exactly are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything. Then answer the question. I've answered truthfully. But I can't discuss protected employment information outside official verification procedures. Officer Cole walked closer. You hear that? He sounds rehearsed. Nathan didn't respond. Years in federal service had taught him something simple. Arguments rarely improved difficult encounters. Professionalism often did. Miller handed the registration back, but kept Nathan's driver's license. Step out of the vehicle. Nathan looked at him. May I ask why? Because I'm giving you a lawful order. Nathan slowly unfastened his seatbelt. Understood. He stepped onto the shoulder with both hands visible. Cars continued rushing past only a few feet away, their drivers completely unaware that an ordinary traffic stop was quietly becoming something far more complicated. Miller began a brief pat-down. No weapons. No, sir. No badge. Not on my person. Cole exchanged a glance with his partner. Convenient. Nathan ignored the comment. Miller looked directly at him. Turn around. Nathan complied without hesitation. The cold metal of handcuffs closed around his wrists. Several passing motorists slowed as they drove by. None of them knew the full story. Neither did the officers. Miller spoke into his shoulder radio. Dispatch, we're transporting one subject claiming to be federal law enforcement. Begin verification. Nathan remained completely still. He didn't protest. He didn't invoke authority. He didn't mention names. Instead, he quietly looked toward the patrol car and said in the same calm voice he had used from the beginning, I recommend verifying every decision before making the next one. Neither officer understood why those words sounded less like a warning and more like professional advice. The ride to the station lasted less than 15 minutes. No one spoke. Officer Brad Miller kept his eyes fixed on the road, while Officer Dylan Cole occasionally glanced into the rearview mirror. Nathan Brooks sat quietly in the back seat, his hands secured behind him, watching the familiar streets pass through the reinforced glass. He had spent enough years in law enforcement to recognize the silence. Sometimes it meant officers were thinking. Sometimes it meant they had already made up their minds. When the cruiser pulled into the station's secured parking area, Nathan stepped out without being told twice. He followed every instruction exactly as it was given. Inside, the booking area buzzed with the routine sounds of another busy afternoon. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. A dispatcher spoke rapidly into a headset while another officer finished processing paperwork from an unrelated arrest. Nothing suggested that this case would become any different from the dozens handled that day. Officer Miller placed Nathan's driver's license on the counter. Subject claims to be federal law enforcement. The booking officer looked up. Agency. Miller shrugged. He won't say. Nathan answered calmly before anyone else could. I said I couldn't discuss operational assignments outside official verification procedures. The booking officer typed his name into the state database. Nathan Brooks. Driver's license valid. No warrants. No criminal history. He frowned. Employment isn't listed. Miller folded his arms. Try federal. The booking officer accessed another verification portal. A loading screen appeared. Several seconds passed. Then a message. Filled the monitor. Access restricted. Authorized credentials required. The officer blinked. That's unusual. Miller leaned closer. Try again. He did. The same message appeared. Cole gave a quiet chuckle. Maybe he watches too many spy movies. Nathan remained silent. The booking officer switched to another federal directory. Again, the search returned almost nothing. Name confirmed. Identity verified. Employment information unavailable. No agency listed. No supervisor listed. No accessible personnel record. Only another notice. Further verification required. The room became noticeably quieter. The booking officer looked toward Nathan. Do you have any federal credentials with you? Nathan nodded. They're secured inside my vehicle. Miller answered before Nathan could continue. We searched him. I wasn't carrying them. Convenient. Nathan met Miller's eyes. I don't carry credentials while off duty unless required. The booking officer rubbed his forehead. This doesn't make much sense. Nathan spoke evenly. It will. The officer hesitated. You seem awfully confident. I'm confident the verification process works. Miller sighed impatiently. Then let's verify it. The booking officer reached for the phone. What agency do I call? Nathan answered without hesitation. The emergency verification number inside my credential case. Miller frowned. Which we don't have. It's inside the vehicle. Cole crossed his arms. So we're supposed to believe the proof is somewhere we can't see. Nathan didn't react. I've made no request for special treatment. I've only asked that proper procedures be followed. The booking officer exchanged another glance with Miller. Finally, he said, we'll contact the Federal Coordination Desk. Several minutes later, the call connected. The officer identified himself, provided Nathan's full name and date of birth, then waited. His expression slowly changed. He repeated the information, waited again, then looked toward Miller. They're asking us to hold. The line remained silent for nearly 30 seconds. No music, no transfers, just silence. Finally, a calm voice returned. We are unable to confirm employment through this line. Miller rolled his eyes. I knew it. But the voice continued before anyone could hang up. We have only 3 questions. The booking officer picked up his pen. Go ahead. Is Mr. Nathan Brooks currently safe? Yes. Has any force beyond standard handcuffing been used? No. A brief pause followed. Then came the 3rd question. Is he still in your custody? The booking officer looked at Miller before answering. Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. Then the voice replied with perfect composure. Do not release him. The room fell completely silent. The caller continued. Our representatives are already on their way. The words hung in the booking room long after the call had ended. Our representatives are already on their way. The line disconnected. No explanation. No agency name. No request for additional information. Only an instruction. Do not release him. Officer Brad Miller slowly lowered the receiver. What kind of verification call ends like that? No one answered. Even Dylan Cole's confidence seemed to soften for the first time. The booking officer looked back at his computer screen, hoping another database might finally provide a simple explanation. Nothing changed. Nathan Brooks remained little more than a verified citizen with a locked employment record. It made no sense. The booking officer turned toward Nathan. "Mr. Brooks, is there something we're missing?" Nathan stood exactly where he had been asked to stand. His wrists remained cuffed behind his back. His posture never changed. "You have everything you're authorized to know." Miller exhaled sharply. "That's becoming a very frustrating answer." "I understand. You don't seem nervous." Nathan offered a small nod. "I've learned that procedures exist for a reason." Cole leaned against the counter. "If you really work in federal law enforcement, why wouldn't they just tell us?" Nathan looked toward him. "Perhaps because they follow procedures too." That answer irritated Miller even more. Before he could respond, a dispatcher stepped into the room. "Brad." He turned. "The watch commander wants an update." Miller walked away, leaving Cole watching Nathan. Neither man spoke. Outside, afternoon sunlight reflected across the station's front windows. The parking lot remained almost empty except for patrol vehicles lined neatly against the curb. Then something changed. A dark SUV rolled slowly through the security gate. No emergency lights. No siren. Just a clean black vehicle with government plates. Seconds later, another identical SUV entered behind it. Neither vehicle parked immediately. Instead, they stopped near the entrance as if waiting for instructions. Cole noticed first. "You expecting somebody?" The dispatcher looked outside. "I wasn't told about any visitors." Miller returned from the hallway and followed everyone's eyes toward the parking lot. What agency uses black SUVs without markings? No one knew. Inside the first vehicle, nobody stepped out. The engine continued idling. Inside the booking room, the atmosphere shifted almost imperceptibly. Routine conversation disappeared. Officers passing through the hallway slowed as they glanced outside. One patrol sergeant walked over to the front window before quietly speaking into his portable radio. Nathan never turned toward the glass. He already knew someone had arrived. Miller noticed. "You don't even want to see who's here?" Nathan answered calmly. "If they're here for me, they'll come inside. If they're not, then nothing changes." Cole studied him carefully. For the first time since the traffic stop, Nathan didn't seem like a man hoping to prove himself. He looked like someone patiently waiting for a process to finish. Another minute passed. The front entrance opened. Several footsteps echoed across the tile floor. Not hurried, not aggressive, measured, professional. The conversations throughout the station gradually faded. Even officers who had nothing to do with the arrest looked toward the hallway. Someone important had entered the building. No badges flashed. No voices were raised. Only quiet confidence filled the corridor. Then a calm voice spoke just outside the booking room. "We're here regarding Mr. Nathan Brooks." Every officer instinctively turned toward the doorway. And for the first time that afternoon, Officer Brad Miller realized this traffic stop was no longer under his control. The man who entered first wore no uniform. No visible badge. No rank on his shoulders. Only a dark navy suit, polished black shoes, and the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to walking into difficult rooms without raising his voice. He paused just inside the booking area. His eyes moved across every face before settling on Nathan Brooks. Then he nodded once. "Mr. Brooks." Nathan returned the nod. "Good afternoon." The simple exchange caught everyone's attention. Officer Brad Miller stepped forward. "I'm Officer Miller. Who are you?" The visitor reached into his jacket and presented official credentials. "My name is Richard Bennett. I'm with the Department of Justice." No one spoke. Bennett calmly waited until Miller finished examining the identification before continuing. "I'm here regarding Mr. Brooks." Miller handed the credentials back. "Can you verify his employment?" "I can verify that this matter falls under federal authority." "That's not what I asked." "I understand." Bennett's tone never changed. "But that's the information I'm authorized to provide." Miller's frustration was becoming increasingly visible. "So we're just supposed to hand him over?" "No." Bennett looked directly at him. "I'm asking you to continue following your procedures." The answer surprised everyone. Nathan remained in handcuffs. No demands were made. No accusations were offered. No threats appeared. Instead, Bennett removed a slim folder from his briefcase. "There are several preservation requests." The booking officer accepted the document. Bennett spoke with measured precision. "Please preserve all body-worn camera recordings." He continued. "All dash camera footage. Dispatch audio. Radio traffic. Booking room surveillance. property inventory records, officer notes, computer access logs, and any reports created from the initial traffic stop through the present moment. Each request sounded less like an investigation and more like standard procedure. Miller frowned. Is someone accusing us of misconduct? Bennett answered immediately. No. Then why preserve everything? Because complete records protect everyone. Those words lingered in the room. Protect everyone. Not protect Nathan. Not protect the officers. Everyone. Nathan quietly observed the exchange without interruption. His expression never suggested satisfaction, only patience. The booking officer carefully placed the preservation notice beside the incident file. I'll make sure everything is retained. Thank you, Bennett replied. One additional request. Everyone looked toward him. Mr. Brooks is not to be questioned further regarding his federal employment. Miller crossed his arms. Who's giving that instruction? Bennett met his eyes. The office with authority to do so. Before Miller could respond, another officer standing near the front lobby spoke into the hallway. They're here. Several heads turned toward the entrance. Through the station's glass doors, another government vehicle had just entered the parking lot. Unlike the earlier SUVs, this sedan displayed small federal flags mounted near the front fenders. The engine shut off. The rear passenger door opened. A tall man stepped onto the pavement. His dark service uniform was immaculate. Rows of ribbons stretched across his chest. Silver insignia reflected beneath the afternoon sun. Even from inside the station, his presence carried unmistakable authority. Bennett glanced toward the entrance before looking back at Officer Miller. The person you're about to meet, he said quietly, is here to complete the verification process. For the first time since the traffic stop began, no one in the room doubted that everything was about to change. The station grew so quiet that even the sound of polished shoes crossing the tile floor seemed unusually loud. Every conversation stopped. Every keyboard fell silent. The uniformed officer entered with calm, deliberate steps. He was tall, composed, and impeccably dressed in a decorated service uniform. Silver insignia gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights, while rows of ribbons reflected decades of distinguished service. Without introducing himself, he first looked toward Nathan Brooks. Their eyes met. Nathan gave a respectful nod. The officer returned it. Only then did he face the room. Richard Bennett spoke first. Thank you for coming, General. Several officers exchanged confused glances. General? Officer Brad Miller looked from Bennett to the uniformed visitor. I'm sorry, General. The officer reached into his breast pocket and produced official military identification. My name is General Michael Harrison. I've been asked to assist with the verification of Mr. Nathan Brooks. Miller accepted the credentials carefully. Everything appeared authentic. Official seal. Military identification. Department authorization. Nothing about it looked questionable. He returned the identification. What exactly is Mr. Brooks' connection to the Army? General Harrison answered without hesitation. None. The unexpected response only deepened the confusion. Nathan remained perfectly still. Still handcuffed. Still silent. General Harrison continued. My presence is not because Mr. Brooks serves in the United States Army. He looked briefly toward Nathan before finishing the sentence. My presence is because the department requested an executive-level verification. The room became still once again. Miller frowned. So who is he? General Harrison smiled politely. That is the purpose of my visit. He stepped toward Nathan. Mr. Brooks. General, I apologize for the delay. No apology is necessary. The professionalism between the two men was impossible to ignore. This was not a first meeting. This was not a stranger verifying paperwork. These were two professionals who clearly knew one another. General Harrison turned toward Officer Miller. I have personally confirmed Mr. Brooks' federal credentials. Miller immediately asked, so he really is a federal officer? Yes. What agency? General Harrison answered carefully. That information remains protected. Miller looked frustrated. Then what exactly can you tell us? General Harrison folded his hands behind his back. I can tell you that Mr. Brooks accurately identified himself. I can tell you he never made a false statement. I can tell you he fully cooperated from the beginning. He paused. And I can tell you this incident now falls under formal federal review. No accusation accompanied those words. Only certainty. Richard Bennett opened his folder again. The preservation orders remain in effect. The booking officer quietly nodded. Already completed. General Harrison looked toward Nathan. Were you treated professionally after arriving here? Nathan answered without hesitation. Yes. Were you injured? No. Were you denied medical attention? No. His answers surprised Miller. Nathan wasn't trying to build a complaint. He was simply answering truthfully. General Harrison seemed satisfied. He turned back toward the officers. There is one remaining matter. Every eye in the room followed him. The department has authorized me to disclose one additional fact regarding Mr. Brooks' position. Miller leaned forward slightly. The booking officer stopped writing. Even Dylan Cole unconsciously held his breath. General Harrison looked directly at Officer Miller. I believe you'll understand why the verification required this level of coordination. He paused just long enough for the silence to become almost unbearable. Because Officer Nathan Brooks is not simply a federal law enforcement officer. He serves in one of the highest leadership positions within the federal government. For several long seconds, no one moved. The words echoed through the booking room with unexpected weight. He serves in one of the highest leadership positions within the federal government. Officer Brad Miller stared at General Harrison. What leadership position? General Harrison looked toward Richard Bennett. Bennett gave a slight nod. The authorization had been granted. General Harrison turned back to the room. Mr. Nathan Brooks currently serves as Deputy Director of a federal investigative task force responsible for coordinating sensitive operations involving multiple agencies. Silence. Not the uncomfortable silence from earlier. This one carried disbelief. The booking officer slowly lowered his pen. Dylan Cole blinked twice, trying to process what he had just heard. Miller looked toward Nathan. You never said that. Nathan answered in the same calm voice he had used since the traffic stop. You never asked my position. You only asked whether I worked in federal law enforcement, and I answered truthfully. No one could argue with that. Every statement Nathan had made since the flashing lights appeared behind his car had been accurate. Every instruction had been followed. Every question had received an honest answer. General Harrison continued. Mr. Brooks routinely coordinates operations involving federal investigators, state agencies, and local departments. He also conducts leadership reviews regarding interagency cooperation. Another quiet pause settled over the room. The irony became impossible to ignore. The man standing in handcuffs had spent years helping improve relationships between agencies like theirs. Richard Bennett opened another folder. This incident was never about status. He looked directly at every officer present. It remains about procedure. He continued calmly. Mr. Brooks did not identify himself to avoid accountability. He identified himself because you requested his occupation. He never resisted. He never threatened anyone. He never attempted to use his position to influence your decisions. General Harrison nodded. That distinction matters. Officer Miller slowly looked down at the handcuffs still secured around Nathan's wrists. For the first time that afternoon, they seemed heavier than steel. They represented assumptions, not evidence. Miller cleared his throat. Mr. Brooks. Nathan looked at him. I owe you an apology. Nathan remained composed. Officer, whether an apology is appropriate can wait. What matters now is documenting everything accurately. There was no anger in his voice. No sarcasm. No satisfaction. Only professionalism. Richard Bennett glanced toward the booking officer. Has every recording been preserved? Yes. Body cameras? Yes. Dash cameras? Yes. Dispatch logs? Already secured. Bennett closed the folder. Excellent. General Harrison stepped beside Nathan. May the restraints be removed? Officer Miller hesitated only briefly before reaching for the handcuff key. The metallic click echoed throughout the room. Nathan slowly brought his hands forward, rubbing his wrists only once before lowering them calmly to his sides. He didn't demand respect. He didn't remind anyone of his title. Instead, he straightened his jacket and quietly thanked the officer who had removed the cuffs. That simple gesture affected the room more than any speech could have. General Harrison watched Nathan for a moment before speaking. This is exactly why he was selected to lead. Nathan smiled faintly. The badge is never the measure of a person. It's how they treat others when no one knows who they are. No one in the booking room could meet his eyes. Because every person there now understood the same painful truth. Nathan Brooks hadn't revealed his authority to earn respect. He had withheld it, to discover whether respect would be given without it. The atmosphere inside the station had completely changed. Only 20 minutes earlier, Nathan Brooks had been treated as a suspicious driver whose words were met with doubt. Now every person in the room understood they had been speaking to a man responsible for helping oversee the very partnerships their department depended upon. No one celebrated the revelation. No one argued. Reality had quietly replaced assumption. Richard Bennett broke the silence. Mr. Brooks, before we conclude today's verification, there is one procedural matter. Nathan nodded. I'm listening. The department would like to know whether you wish to initiate a formal complaint. Every officer in the room looked toward Nathan. Even Officer Brad Miller lifted his eyes. No one interrupted. No one breathed louder than necessary. Nathan considered the question for several seconds. His answer came without hesitation. No. The single word surprised everyone. Bennett spoke carefully. You understand that decision is entirely yours. I do. You have every right to request an internal investigation. I understand. General Harrison watched Nathan with quiet respect. May I ask why? Nathan folded his hands in front of him. Because investigations should serve accountability, not revenge. The room remained silent. Nathan continued. If policy was violated, policy should address it. If training was insufficient, training should improve. If judgment failed, then judgment must be examined. He paused, before adding one final sentence. But I have no interest in humiliating anyone. Officer Miller slowly lowered his head. For the first time that day, his voice carried none of the confidence it had displayed during the traffic stop. I judged you before I knew you. Nathan looked directly at him. You judged me before you knew anything. There was no anger in the words. Only honesty. Miller nodded. You're right. I saw a black man driving an expensive vehicle. I assumed the rest. No one challenged the admission. Everyone understood exactly what he meant. Nathan answered quietly. Bias rarely announces itself. It usually sounds like certainty. Those words settled heavily throughout the booking room. Richard Bennett closed his notebook. I believe that sentence belongs in every leadership seminar we conduct. A few officers managed faint, uncomfortable smiles. Not because the moment was humorous, because the truth often arrived with uncomfortable clarity. General Harrison stepped toward Officer Miller. This profession asks people to make fast decisions. But speed is never an excuse for abandoning fairness. Miller nodded once. I understand. I hope you do. Nathan walked toward the property counter where his belongings had already been placed in a sealed evidence tray. The booking officer handed everything back with both hands. My apologies, sir. Nathan accepted the items with quiet gratitude. Thank you. He checked nothing. Not his wallet. Not his phone. Not even his badge case. He simply trusted that the people before him had completed their responsibilities honestly. That simple act of trust carried unexpected weight. As Nathan slipped his badge case into his jacket, Officer Dylan Cole finally spoke. Mr. Brooks. Nathan turned. I hope someday we earn back the confidence we lost today. Nathan offered a small, genuine smile. Confidence isn't earned by never making mistakes. It's earned by what you choose to do after you recognize them. No one wrote those words down. No one needed to. Everyone in that room knew they would remember them long after Nathan Brooks walked out the station doors. 3 weeks later, the incident report was finally complete. It was not a criminal investigation. No arrests had been made. No lawsuits had been filed. Instead, hundreds of pages of documentation had quietly moved through professional review channels. Body camera recordings, dispatch transcripts, dash camera footage, radio communications, booking logs. Every decision had been examined in chronological order. Nothing had been rushed. Nothing had been ignored. Inside a federal conference room several states away, Nathan Brooks sat at the end of a long table surrounded by representatives from multiple agencies. The atmosphere was serious but respectful. No cameras. No reporters. Only professionals discussing how trust between agencies could be strengthened. Richard Bennett placed the completed report on the table. The review has concluded. Nathan nodded. What were the findings? Bennett opened the summary. The officers acted within several procedural requirements. He turned another page. They also demonstrated significant failures in judgment during the initial contact. No one seemed surprised. General Harrison sat quietly across the table. The distinction matters. He looked around the room. Procedure without impartial judgment eventually undermines public confidence. Several agency leaders nodded. Another official added, The review panel unanimously agreed that additional interagency training should be implemented. Not punishment. Training. Nathan remained silent. Bennett continued reading. The panel also recommends expanded instruction regarding implicit bias, professional communication, and verification procedures involving protected federal personnel. Nathan finally spoke. I would support one additional recommendation. Everyone looked toward him. Go ahead. Nathan folded his hands. Remove the words protected federal personnel. The room became quiet. Bennett raised an eyebrow. Explain. Nathan answered without hesitation. Every citizen deserves the same careful verification. My position should never become the reason procedures improve. If today's lessons only protect people with government credentials, then we've learned the wrong lesson. Several people slowly nodded. General Harrison smiled faintly. I expected nothing less. The recommendation was revised immediately. A few moments later, another document was placed before Nathan. It contained no disciplinary orders, no commendations, only a request. Would he be willing to help design the updated training program? Nathan looked down at the page, then back at the room. I will. One official smiled. I had a feeling you would. Nathan signed the acceptance form. Weeks later, Officer Brad Miller received an invitation to attend the department's first revised leadership seminar. He entered the classroom expecting another mandatory lecture. Instead, the instructor projected a single sentence onto the screen. The badge is never the measure of a person. It's how they treat others when no one knows who they are. Miller recognized the words immediately. He didn't know Nathan had written the curriculum. He didn't need to. The lesson already carried Nathan's voice. Throughout the session, no names were mentioned. No departments were criticized. No individual officers were singled out. The case had never become about public embarrassment. It had become something far more valuable. An opportunity to improve the next decision. The next traffic stop. The next conversation. The next person whose true story remained invisible behind first impressions. And somewhere beyond the classroom walls, Nathan Brooks quietly returned to work. Not as a symbol, not as a victim, simply as a leader who understood that the strongest form of justice is the kind that leaves the system better than it found it. 6 months passed. The traffic stop that had once seemed destined to become another forgotten afternoon slowly transformed into something far more meaningful. Not because of headlines. There were none. Not because of lawsuits. There were none. And not because someone had been publicly destroyed. No one was. The real change happened quietly. Across training academies. Inside briefing rooms. During conversations between officers who had never met Nathan Brooks. His case was no longer known by his name. It had become known simply as the verification case. New recruits studied it during ethics instruction. Experienced supervisors discussed it during leadership workshops. The lesson never focused on titles. It focused on assumptions. One afternoon, Nathan was invited to speak at a regional conference attended by law enforcement leaders from dozens of agencies. He stood behind a simple podium. No dramatic introduction. No mention of what had happened to him. Only one question from the moderator. What is the most important lesson officers should remember? Nathan looked across the audience. Hundreds of uniforms. Different agencies. Different communities. One shared responsibility. He answered quietly. Every person you stop is living a story you cannot see. The room remained silent. He continued. Some will be teachers. Some will be mechanics. Some will be parents trying to get home. Some may wear badges you never know about. But every single one deserves the same respect before you know who they are. No applause interrupted him. The audience simply listened. Because everyone understood he wasn't talking about one traffic stop. He was talking about every future encounter. After the conference, Officer Brad Miller waited near the exit. He had driven several hours to attend. When Nathan approached, Miller extended his hand. Nathan accepted it. I wanted to thank you. Nathan smiled. For what? For giving us the opportunity to become better instead of making us examples. Nathan considered the words. I didn't give anyone that opportunity. You chose it. Miller nodded slowly. I suppose that's true. Before leaving, he reached into his folder and handed Nathan a photograph. It showed a graduating class of newly sworn officers. Written across the bottom were the words, fairness before assumption. Our academy adopted it as this year's class motto, Miller said. Nathan looked at the photograph for several quiet seconds. Then he folded it carefully and placed it inside his notebook. I'll keep this. As they walked toward the parking lot, the afternoon sun reflected softly across the rows of patrol vehicles. The same kind of vehicles that had once surrounded Nathan on the side of the road. Only now, they represented something different. Not fear, responsibility. Nathan paused before getting into his car. He looked back one last time. Justice, he had learned long ago, was never about proving someone powerful. It was about proving that every person matters before their power is ever known. Because a badge can identify authority, a title can command respect. But character is revealed only when neither one is visible. And on one ordinary afternoon, a man wearing ordinary clothes reminded an entire system that the strongest form of justice begins long before anyone asks who you are.